Khorne here, and today I will be ranking all of the different Dawi units based on how good they are in the single player campaign map. So things I will be taking into consideration is just how good these units are at holding the line, dishing out damage, how easy they are to recruit, their cost, and just overall utility. I will also be giving you some suggestions on what kind of army compositions you can make with them and where best to bring them. Now, for the ranking, I will be placing them in 5 different categories. Doomstack worthy, where these units are ridiculously strong and can be made unstoppable. Bread and butter units, these units are going to be the backbone of your armies, and you should always try and have as many of them as you can. Situational units, units that aren't meant for every situation, but can be very useful in certain situations and against certain enemies. Expendable trash, these units are there just to die and buy your other units time to dish out damage. And actual trash, where I just recommend you don't recruit these units. So let's start with all of the melee infantry. First up we have miners and miners with blasting charges. Now miners are a tier 0 unit which you can recruit whenever you have nothing better and are in desperate need for units. But they lack any real staying or killing power. Still, for a tier 0 unit they can be rather useful, and so I will place them as expendable trash. Now miners with blasting charges, they can actually kill stuff. They have a missile attack in the form of a explosive satchel that does quite a bit of damage to all infantry units in the game because they have really good armor-piercing explosive damage, meaning they can kill much higher tier infantry than them. Not to mention you can increase their ammunition in a few different ways. Unfortunately, you require a barracks to recruit them, and their lack of range and killing power against single entities means they aren't really suited for every situation, but as a early game unit, they can be quite useful. So I will place them as situational units, get them early on, and replace them whenever they become a hindrance. Now let's rank all of the line-holding infantry first. So Dwarf warriors, longbeards, and ironbreakers are all going to be your bread and butter units. These units should always make up your front line and stop the enemy from reaching your damage dealers. Ironbreakers, even though they take 2 turns to recruit and have a high upkeep cost, they also have the exact same blasting charges as miners, so they can both dish out damage and hold the line to the last dwarf. As for all of their great weapon variants, including the hammerers, I would avoid recruiting them, as you don't need damage-dealing melee infantry in your Dawi armies, and they hold the line much worse than their previous versions. So keeping that in mind, I will place them all as do not recruit, with the exception being the grudge hammerers and longbeards, as they can come in handy for emergencies. Alright, now for the Slayer in the room, where to rank them. Previously, I've always stated you should never recruit this unit, but after Thrones of Decay and all of their updates, I'm finding it quite hard to determine where they belong. While I wouldn't say they are your bread and butter units, they're much better than they used to be, so for now I will rank them as situationally good. But you will have to listen to the army composition part of the video to understand why. After the melee infantry come the range infantry. And first off, we have all of the quarreler units and just the regular version of rangers, all going into the bread and butter units. Not much I can say about them, aside from the fact they are going to be your damage dealers through the early stage of your campaign, and then you should try and replace them with thunderers. Then, as we mentioned, thunderers, who are also going to be your bread and butter units, but are much stronger than quarrelers. Then we have the iron drakes, same deal as the previous unit. But when it comes to rangers with great weapons, trollhammer torpedoes, and grudge rakers, they are all a do not recruit for me. Trollhammer torpedoes simply have no place in any of my Dawi armies. Even with their range increase, they are just not as good as thunderers at deleting large units. Rangers with great weapons have no range to kill the enemies, and grudge rakers are miserably bad when it comes to killing infantry units. If you ever compare the Chaos Dwarf blunderbusses to rakers, you will see the damage difference is just brutal. Finally, we have the Bugman's Rangers, and they are Doomstack worthy. Not just for Belegar either. Your Saints have a skill that gives them snipe, they can regenerate, are decent melee combatants, and simply put, they are an amazing all-around unit. Then we have the artillery, and let's start with the best ones. So organ guns and grudge throwers. Both of these are going to be your bread and butter units. You will first get the grudge throwers in your early campaign, and then when you are able, you will want to replace them with organ guns. Except for the grudge thrower unit, which I would keep all throughout the campaign as it does more damage and it has a slowing effect that can be very powerful. Next, let's go to the situational units, and here we have the Goblin Hewers, which I'm gonna talk about later, and the cannon. Now the cannon is here simply because it is going to be useful in some situations, such as taking out enemy artillery. But aside from that, cannons have very little use in your Dawi armies. As for the flame cannon and bolt throwers, I personally wouldn't recruit either. Now I don't know why, but ever since Thrones of Decay, I've noticed that the flame cannons are extremely weak against high armor infantry. And for a tier 4 unit, that really shouldn't be the case. In combination with their short range, low ammo, I just can't say they are a good unit to use anymore. And I think they are much worse than they used to be. The only time I would actually recruit one is the grudge thrower unit, and only when you are in an emergency. And bolt throwers, I know they have 8 models now, they are still awful. Lastly, we have flying machines, and let's start with the best ones. So Thunder Barges go into the Doomstack category. They are expensive, they take a long time to recruit, but they are extremely powerful and can destroy entire armies of enemies. Right next to them is going to be the Gyrocopters, and Gyrocopters with Troll Hammer torpedoes. For a tier 2 unit, Gyrocopters are absolutely amazing. Before their update, they did almost no damage and could be easily taken out of the sky. But now, they just kill units before the enemy has a chance to retaliate. Not to mention the Troll Hammer torpedo version just annihilates anything that is large in seconds. Pair these two up and you will be unstoppable on the battlefield. Next we have Gyro Bombers, and I will place them as situational. They are good at killing enemy lords and heroes, they can be decent at killing large targets, and they have much stronger bombs that can get them hundreds of kills if used properly. The only problem is they're not really as good as Gyrocopters. Finally, the Brimstone Guns, I just never recruit this unit. Absolutely no damage, no ammo, the only thing they have going for it is the bombs they can drop. Alright, that is the tier list for the Dwarfs done. Now when it comes to building their armies, you have to keep in mind the role of each unit and how many you need in any army. The melee infantry are there to hold the line, and the range units are there to be damage dealers. You will always want to start by having heroes in your armies, so you will want one Thane, one Dragon Slayer, one Engineer, and one Runesmith in your armies. This is ideal for every single one of your armies. The Engineer to boost your missile units, the Runesmith to boost your army and cast some rune magic. The Thane can be skipped in most situations, but he is good for boosting units such as Rangers and Miners, and is also very good at holding the line. Finally, the Dragon Slayer to sit back and enjoy the show, as he will be replenishing your army afterwards. Now, he will not be getting an honorable death, ever, so don't send them into melee unless absolutely necessary. As for the lords, I personally prefer the generic lords, as they boost your army the most. Runesmiths are decent, and Slayer lords, well, we'll talk about them later. So the first army composition you want is going to be the standard dwarf army. First, you will want to have the line holders, which depending on the stage of your campaign, you will either get dwarf warriors early on, longbeards a bit later into your campaign, and if you play the campaign for long enough, iron breakers. About 5 should be the minimum, more would be good if you can put them in without taking other units out. For the range infantry, again, depending on the stage of your campaign, you will want either Quarrelers, which are very useful early on because of their extra range, and Thunderers, which will later on be much better in every single way possible, especially when you research their associated technologies. Again, 5 is enough, I probably wouldn't get more. A unit or two of Iron Drakes is also going to be an important addition to your armies for when having to deal with sieges or hordes of enemies. Now, when it comes to the artillery, I would get up to 4, but you can now replace them with gyrocopters. You can get about 3 gyrocopters and send them to take out enemy artillery pieces. I would never get just 1 gyrocopter, as it will get shot out of the sky fairly easily, but I would also never get so many that you can't get any artillery pieces, because you will need them for siege attacker. This type of army you will bring to almost every battlefield, and it is going to be best when dealing with enemies that outnumber you 5 to 1. The biggest problem will be when you are both outnumbered and outclassed. So for this army to be effective, you have to be fighting against enemies that are the same tier or lower than your own army. Meaning that you can't bring dwarf warriors and quarrelers to fight against chosen. As if you do, the enemy will breach your front line while your range units struggle to kill the enemy. Alright, and now for this spicy bit. All Slayer Armies, where all of your previous dwarf knowledge goes out the window. This is the entire reason why I marked Slayers as situational. You see, you are able to boost Slayers by a decent amount. You can reduce their upkeep cost and increase their stats with your Slayer Lord skills, Malachi skills, and technologies. Because of this, Slayers can become extremely powerful, especially Slayer Pirates. Now, when I say powerful, I don't really mean unstoppable, or even actually that good, but they can definitely fight and win against units that are supposed to be much stronger than them. So if you want a all Slayer army, I would suggest getting a Slayer Lord with all of the unique skills to boost Slayers, a Dragon Slayer hero to help replenish your casualties, 2 Runesmiths to boost the army with damage and armor, an Engineer, and just fill the army with Slayer Pirates. A combination of regular Slayers and Slayer Pirates is also fine, but in my opinion, less effective. And 4 to 6 Goblin Heroes, which are there to help kill any giant monsters you may be facing. Just be careful when firing at the enemy over the heads of your own units, as an axe to the back of the head is not an honorable way to die. Now, in order to do well with this sort of army, you have to forget you're playing Dwarfs. Instead, you have to charge the enemy like a maniac if they have range units. Or wait for them if they're all melee, just avoid huddling up in the corner of the map. Instead, try to get as many of your units involved with combat as possible. Now, you can also swap the Slayer Pirates with Doomseekers, but they are much more expensive. You can also boost them less, and they don't have as much killing power. Just keep in mind that this is the only situation in which Slayers work. Never recruit Slayers in your standard Dwarf armies, as they will actually lower your chances of winning battles in that case. Slayers don't belong in the Dawi unit roster and are completely out of place in it. So to make them work, you have to separate them from your heavily armored and much slower units. Now, when it comes to which enemy you should bring them up against, never bring them against an opponent that outnumbers you. Because of their lack of armor, Slayers will die to the lowliest of Skaven slaves, so to make them work, you really have to be fighting the same amount of enemy forces. Still, they are exceptionally good at killing higher tier units than them, especially the Slayer Pirates, which with their pistols can easily delete any high armor, high stat units such as Chosen, and trade extremely well in terms of balance of power. So bring them up against high quality armies and not armies with high numbers. And lastly, just Doomstack armies, which I'm guessing you all already know. But Gyrocopter Doomstack, Thunderbarge Doomstack, Bugman's Rangers Doomstack, Hammerer Doomstack, which I recommend you never build, ever. I don't think I have to explain too much about these armies. I personally dislike the Thunderbarge Doomstack just because for the same price as one of them, I can have 3 armies of combined arms. But Gyrocopters are amazing for a tier 2 unit and they can make a really strong Doomstack. My recommendation is to recruit them with Grumbrindle as he boosts them by ridiculous amounts. Well, this is all I had to share with you in regards to building up your Dawi armies. If you want to watch more of these types of videos, don't forget to subscribe for future content. And let me know in the comments which race you would like to see next. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.